Welcome. I'm Jason Nazar, the co-founder and CEO of Comparably, and thank you for joining us in our next interview series of If I Knew Then, looking at leadership lessons from some of the most amazing CEOs. And so excited to have today Dave Gilboa from Warby Parker, the co-founder, co-CEO. Dave, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for joining us today and so much to go into. So for those of you that have joined us before, thank you for coming back. For those of you that are new for the first time, again, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Comparably. We are an employee review platform to help make workplaces more transparent and to help make sure folks understand what it's like to work at great organizations like Warby Parker. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started and sold a couple businesses and a pretty active investor and board member here in Southern California. And happy to talk to a fellow original SoCal native with Dave. But just when I think of the companies that have built some of the most amazing brands and came on the scene, I feel like Warby Parker is at the top of that list and really a beloved brand, not only for what the product does, but what the company stands for. And so, Dave, I want to turn this over to you. I think everyone on this, interview today is going to know and be familiar with the company, but, in your own words, how do you talk about Warby Parker today?
Sure. So Warby Parker is a direct-to-consumer brand. So we created our own brand of eyewear and contacts that we sell to our customers, both online and offline. And we really created the brand to stand for fun, creativity, and doing good in the world without charging a premium for it. And so for every pair of glasses that we sell, we also distribute a pair to someone in need.
Yeah. So I always get fascinated about, somebody's why of starting a business. You got this bioengineering, background in undergrad, MBA, bunch of consulting experience. Why eyewear? Why high-end prescription eyewear? Where did that even come from?
Yeah, so I founded Warby Parker in 2010 with my three close friends and classmates, really because we were frustrated consumers and wanted to solve our own problems. And prior to that, I'd been working in consulting in finance and realized that I wasn't super passionate about financial services and wanted to go back to school. I was working with a bunch of executives and entrepreneurs that seemed like they were having a lot more fun than I was, and decided to take a few months off in between working and going back to school. And I backpacked around the world, and on my last day of work at a bank called Allen & Company, I handed in my company issued BlackBerry, which is probably dating myself here. And I traveled for a few months, backpacked around a bunch of different countries without a phone. And along the way, I lost my only pair of glasses, left them on a plane. And so I showed up back at school in the US on my first day, getting my MBA at Wharton, and I had to buy two things. One was a new phone, and the second was a pair of glasses. And the iPhone 3G had just come out. I went to the Apple store and bought this magical device for $200 that did all these things that I couldn't even have imagined were possible a few years earlier. And then I realized I was going to have to pay $700 for a new pair of glasses. And this is technology that's been around for 800 years. It just didn't make sense to me. Why glasses would cost more than an iPhone. And so I started complaining to anyone that would listen about why glasses were so expensive, and realized that I wasn't the only one that shared this frustration. And a lot of my friends at school were also frustrated consumers, and in particular, Andy on my learning team. So our class of 800 was separated into teams of 6. Andy Hunt was on my learning team. He'd been thinking about why no one was selling glasses online. And so we started talking about it. And that conversation evolved to include Jeff and Neil. And the four of us ended up bootstrapping the business, launching out of our apartments while we were still full-time students.
Did you have a vision for yourself before that of being an entrepreneur? Was it really that the idea that propelled you into it, or did you feel like, hey, I got to put my hat into the ring at some point here?
I think I was excited about the concept of entrepreneurship when I went back to school, but I thought it I didn't have any great ideas at the time, and thought was kind of more intrigued by joining an early stage team, and maybe finding a smart scientist on Penn's campus, and could help be the business person to help commercialize something and help scale that. And it was really kind of a happy accident that I lost a pair of glasses, and then kind of the wheels started turning, and realized that kind of this was a massive industry that didn't make sense. And from a consumer standpoint, I couldn't understand why I was going to have to pay so much, and why there wasn't a better experience around buying eyewear. And then being in business school, kind of had the time to really investigate what was going on in the industry, and realize that there wasn't a good reason, that there were these massive companies that controlled most of the industry. And as a result, most of the glasses in the US were marked up 10 to 20 times what they cost to manufacture, with little innovation on the distribution side. And looking at a bunch of other product categories, whether the world looked very different in 2008 than it does today. And especially the world of e-commerce. You didn't have Amazon as this massive dominant force, but you did have a bunch of companies that were starting to sell products online that people hadn't felt comfortable buying online previously, whether that was books, diapers, diamond rings, shoes. But no one was effectively selling glasses online. And so we thought that there was an opportunity to kind of bring these ideas together, and deliver a better product and better experience for consumers like ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the company's had just an unbelievable amount of success. So it's easy from the outside to feel like, oh, everything's gone right. What, even though you were going to business school and had this background, in consulting, what do you feel like in hindsight you were least prepared for in transitioning to be an entrepreneur? Because you have this idea, you get your three friends together, you're super excited, but what, as you look back, were you least not knowing about what was laying ahead for you in that journey?
Yeah, it's really everything. But I think probably now the company is we're well over 2,000 people, and I think I underappreciated how important kind of the people management aspect of running a business was in those early days. And Wharton has a bunch of classes that you can take tests to pass out of if you score well enough. And so I thought, this is great. I'm going to just pass out of all the required classes so I can free up electives. And so I passed out of all the organizational management, organizational behavior classes. And looking back now, I realized that those were probably the most critical things that I should have been learning while I was at school. But really every aspect of what we were building, we were kind of learning on the fly. And I think today there are some platforms that make starting a business like ours, would have made starting a business like ours much easier than it was back in 2008 to 2010. You didn't have scaled platforms like Shopify or AWS, or even kind of internal tools like Slack or others. And so we had to kind of build all these things ourselves. And none of us on the founding team were technical, so none of us knew how to build a website, even though we were kind of creating an e-com business. None of us had a formal design background, and so we had to figure out how to design and manufacture glasses. Really every aspect of what we were doing, we had to figure out on the fly. And I think we just tried to leverage some of the kind of skills and competencies that we did have. So when we were thinking about how to design our first website, we didn't know how to create wireframes and kind of build a prototype site, but we did know how to use PowerPoint really well. And so we kind of built our first website in PowerPoint slides, printed out a bunch of pages, and would walk into a Starbucks and offer to buy strangers a cup of coffee for $5 if they would spend a few minutes kind of giving us feedback on this prototype site. And we'd put the first page in front of them and tell them, hey, here's the homepage of a site. Use your pretend your finger is the mouse. Where would you click and then they would kind of point somewhere, and then we'd shuffle through the pages and put paper in front of them, and that was kind of our first UX UI testing, and so just tried to figure out in pretty rudimentary ways, kind of how to get feedback from customers, make sure that our idea resonated, and then really just get as much feedback as we could.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I gotta say, that is the first example I've ever heard of taking, user testing software. I think there's usertesting.com, and printing it out and bringing it into the real world. That's pretty awesome. It's funny, my experience was super similar to yours. I started DocStock, a company I sold to Intuit in my last year of my JD MBA program. Same as you, didn't really know anything about how to create a software platform. To me, I think what's really fascinating is I see MBA students all the time and folks that, pitch me, and I'm sure you get it every day of, hey, the next idea, like, what is it that the four of you had? Because you didn't have any software experience. You didn't have any experience in manufacturing. What was the special ingredient that you did have that let you overcome all the things that you didn't have that you needed to be successful?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is that we had a lot of alignment in terms of our values and vision around what we could create and why we were motivated to start this business in the first place. And so I think we looked at a massive industry that hadn't had really much innovation, and thought that there was a really big opportunity there. And even when we got advice from a lot of people around kind of the early concept, and people told us all the reasons why it wouldn't work, we had enough confidence in each other that kind of once we, if we go get advice from someone that we really trust and they come back with really demoralizing feedback, if it was just one of us kind of thinking about this idea on our own, we might have taken that and say, oh, maybe that person's right. But I think we had enough trust and support from that founding team that we could take that feedback into account, but dismiss where it was appropriate. Yeah. And all of us were kind of equally intrigued by the idea of creating a for-profit business that made the world better. And so we spent as much time talking about how to incorporate a social mission into this entity as we did about kind of the business concept itself. And understanding that there was this massive societal problem where well over 1 billion people around the globe need corrective lenses and don't have access to them, and that giving someone a pair of glasses is one of the most effective poverty alleviation tools in the world. Recognizing that we had an opportunity to not only create kind of an interesting business that would solve our own problems as frustrated consumers, but that there was this much bigger opportunity to create value for the world, is something that kind of kept us going, and I think forced us to jump through hoops and break through walls, and even though we didn't have kind of on paper, we weren't the four Wharton MBAs, we weren't kind of the dream team that was going to figure out how to create this e-commerce platform and figure out how to bring innovation to the optical industry. But I think we had a lot of alignment in terms of what our goals were and what our values were. And that helped us kind of get through some of those early challenges.
Do you remember the moment early on where you felt like, oh, this business is going to work, right? Not just like, hey, we can build a good product. Like what was that moment in the early part of the journey where you thought like, oh, we're really doing something special here, and this can get to be a big business?
Yeah, I think it was really the day that we launched our website. So we, again, none of us being technical, none of us having the ability to build our site, We asked around for a lot of recommendations to find an agency that could help build our site. And we got a bunch of different price quotes that were all around the same level. And then one came in at about half the price, and we said, okay, great. We were bootstrapping the business. We were full-time students, hadn't raised any money. So we were watching every penny. And we said, great, we'll take this cheapest option. And not surprisingly, we quickly learned that you often get what you pay for. And kind of halfway, after several months, our site was nowhere close to being finished, and we kept kind of delaying when we thought we would be able to launch. And we finally kind of just gave up on that process. We found an individual engineer on Odesk who was able to kind of build our site, but it was still taking a bit longer than we had expected. And in those early days, we only spent money on three things. We weren't paying ourselves a salary. We didn't have an office. So we spent money on some third-party engineers who could help build our site. Spent money on our initial set of inventory, and we had to pay our suppliers before they would ship any of the glasses, as we didn't have any history, so couldn't get good payment terms. And then we hired a fashion publicist. We recognized that glasses are a fashion item, and we really wanted to get credibility from kind of the fashion and design world, and you only have one opportunity to launch a fashion brand, and so we wanted to do that the right way. And we were able to get meetings and get these great features for our launch in GQ and Vogue. And we got a call from our publicist who said, hey, what are you guys doing? GQ hits newsstands tomorrow. And I just went to your website. It says coming soon.
Oh, wow.
And we said, well, we thought we were in the March issue. It's only the middle of February.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, well, March issue, it's tomorrow. It always comes a month early. And you need to get your website up. And so we were up with this one engineer from Odesk until 4 a.m. Got some of the bugs out of the site, but it still wasn't in a place where we were kind of proud to launch something. But we just hit a button, and all of a sudden our website was live. We didn't tell our best friends that the site was live. My mom didn't know the site was live, but we figured if, on the off chance that someone kind of reads this article and they want to go to the site, we want to have something up. And I was sitting in class the next day, a few hours later, and I had my phone set up to be notified anytime someone placed an order. And all of a sudden, my phone buzzed, and I opened up my laptop. We weren't supposed to be using computers in class, and I emailed Neil, Jeff, and Andy, super excited. And then 10 minutes later, another buzz, and then another buzz, and then another buzz. Wow. And at the end of the hour and a half class, realized that we had taken more orders than we had inventory for. And we didn't have any sold out functionality or waitlist functionality. That was never in our roadmap. We never contemplated that was a feature we would need. And so we had an emergency meeting where we talked about, do we take the website down? Do we just keep taking orders and kind of apologize and figure out how to deal with customers later? We ended up calling Brett, our engineer, and he was able to quickly build some waitlist functionality. All of a sudden, we had a waitlist of 20,000 people. We sold out of all our best-selling styles in the first 3 weeks and hit our first-year sales targets in 3 weeks. And so it was really off to the races, and it was kind of, we were working around the clock. Our brothers and sisters, wives, girlfriends, cousins, anyone that had a free hour, we were grabbing them, and they were helping us respond to customers, process orders. And so it was kind of off to the races from day one.
That's amazing. Yeah, Reid Hoffman has a quote that we all love, that if you're not absolutely embarrassed by your first product that you put out, you took too long to work on it.
Yeah, we certainly had our share of embarrassment in those early days.
Yeah. That's incredible. It just speaks to the fact that you really must have nailed product market fit in terms of design and pricing. What do you think it was about those early sets of glasses and the pricing that just resonated with folks so much?
Yeah, so we'd spent a year and a half building out the concept around the business, building out the brand, the design, and so we at the time the kind of the lean startup movement was really in vogue, and it was all about minimal viable product and get something out to customers, and then you can iterate. And for us, we thought that because glasses have both form and function. So number one, they help people see, and so there has to be trust, built into the product. And number two, there's a fashion element, and so wanted to have enough credibility on the design front that we didn't feel like we could launch something. Our MVP, kind of the minimum viability, the bar for that minimum viability was really high. And we wanted to have something that was fairly polished by the time we launched. But to get there, we did a lot of testing behind the scenes, everything from kind of that UX, UI testing on paper. We developed hundreds of different prototypes of different glasses and invited our friends and strangers over to try them on and ask which ones resonated, which ones fit well, which ones didn't. We did a bunch of conjoint analyses around messages that would resonate on our website. And we recognized that we were trying to do a lot of things at once that were pretty novel. So selling glasses online, offering prescription glasses that normally cost $400 or $500 for $95. And we had the first of its kind home try-on program where we'd ship glasses without prescription lenses in them out to customers for free, include a free return shipping label. We have the social mission with our buy a pair, give a pair program that we were kind of had a lot that we were really excited about and a lot that we wanted to talk about, but also recognized that we needed to keep those messages simple. And so we did kind of a lot of testing to figure out what was kind of most important to consumers. And we realized that number one is kind of fashion and design. So glasses are one of the only things that people wear on their face, and they have to look good. First of all, the second is the price. Third is kind of convenience and customer experience. And then fourth is social mission. And so we kind of architected our website and all our messaging to have that hierarchy. And that's also why we really targeted launching in GQ and Vogue, and why we thought it would, while we had $0, wanted to spend our limited budget on hiring a fashion PR firm to be able to launch and get that credibility. And then I think there's also kind of some element of luck and novelty, and if you open up Instagram today, you probably get bombarded by a dozen new direct consumer brands, and there's a lot of noise. For us, launching in early 2010, there was a real novelty around what we were doing, our business model, every aspect of it. So GQ called us the Netflix of eyewear, and they had a full page spread with a bunch of beautifully shot glasses. They had Bottega Veneta, Tom Ford, and some other high-end brands, and they had price points for them at $400 to $500, and then they had Warby Parker $95, including prescription lenses. And so we realized that most consumers had never considered buying glasses online before, and for us to get their attention, we had to do something that was dramatically different and offered dramatically better value and a better experience. And so kind of getting all those pieces right by the time we launched, I think was something that we felt was necessary. And I think we were kind of fortunate that we were able to get that early press, and it captured a lot of people's attention.
Yeah, it's so fascinating if you think of like all the different variables that need to cross. You built this product that was probably just better than a lot of was on the market, so much more affordably priced, where e-commerce was already popular enough. But if you think about it, print magazines could still move a lot of behavior. Whereas I don't know if today, a company gets that same feature in any popular magazine, it drives anywhere near the amount of early customers. So you really kind of hit that vortex. So it speaks to, not only product market fit, vision, just the importance of timing too. And you all had amazing timing. I want to talk a little bit about your experience as a manager. I remember I was 27 years old. I had been bootstrapping this company for a year. I raised, a seed round, and soon after a first venture capital round. And all of a sudden, I had a team of like 10, 15 people. I was like, wow, I'm a boss and a manager, of a bunch of folks for the first time. And I remember thinking like, okay, there was never any training for this. I did the same as you. I skipped through all my organizational behavior classes in B school just because I thought, oh, there's other stuff I should be learning. What were you like as a manager in those early days for your first 5, 10, 15 employees? And what's the journey been for you personally of what you've evolved into today with a company of 2,000 plus?
Yeah, I think I feel really fortunate to have had three great co-founders, and so even when we were kind of developing the business pre-launch, there were four of us. We didn't have titles or hierarchy, but we kind of took on different areas of responsibility, and even in those early days, we recognized how important feedback would be, and so even kind of before there was a business, we were doing 360 reviews of one another on a monthly basis. And we would kind of just go to our favorite bar, get a bunch of beers, and then, have honest and open conversations around what was working well and what wasn't. And, really wanted honest and direct feedback to both give and receive. To figure out how we can improve kind of as a tiny organization, but also as individuals. And I think we've maintained kind of that spirit of collaboration and feedback as the company scaled. But I think it's super helpful to have that built in to the early days. And certainly as we started then hiring people, we recognized that we were looking for kind of qualities that were similar to us as a founding team. And in those early days, we posted our jobs on Craigslist. And as I mentioned, kind of things were really crazy right after we launched, and we needed a lot of help just kind of processing orders, kind of figuring out how to serve customers. And we didn't have an office. And so we posted jobs on Craigslist. We had people come work out of my co-founder Neil's apartment, and we would write them, personal checks at the end of every week. Didn't have a payroll system. But we recognized that even in those early days, that we were looking for people who were kind of passionate about what we were building, who were curious, who were lifelong learners, who were proactive. And once we were about 20 people and we actually had an office, we realized that, there were kind of a bunch of values and qualities that we were looking for as we were looking to build our team. And we went through a process of articulating those core values, and we involved everyone in the company and asked people to kind of submit to really give a lot of thought and then submit kind of values that were important to them with people that they surround themselves, they want to surround themselves in life by. So not necessarily in a business context, but just in life. And then we had around 200 different values that were submitted. And we went through the process of kind of discussing which ones were similar, which ones were different, which ones we thought were critically important, and which ones were nice to have. And then Neil and I took those and we kind of wordsmithed them and defined our core values as a business. And then we architected a lot of our interview questions to help understand a candidate's alignment to those core values that we had in our organization. And we've certainly had times where we've had team members and sometimes top performers violate one or more of those core values, and we've terminated them as a result. So they're values that we take really seriously, and it's kind of our constitution and operating principles. And so I think that was really helpful in the early days to really define who we are and who we want to be. And I think that's also allowed us to self-select, kind of attract individuals who are aligned with those values to start. And so I think that's been really helpful. And then in terms of kind of scaling the organization, going from a place where it was all hands on deck, where I was really involved in kind of creating everything, whether that was designing a pair of glasses to building a spreadsheet to defining every word that was going to go on the website, where the feedback loops were really fast, so I could kind of understand if something that I was involved in creating worked or didn't. Moving to hiring people that really were better at me at a lot of these individual functions, but kind of giving away trust to them that I wasn't going to have to, initially, I think I probably fell victim to something that happens to a lot of founders where they still want to, the team is growing, but you still want to be involved in everything, and quickly realizing that I became a bottleneck in a bunch of areas, and then building trust with our team.
When did you feel like you started to make that transition?
I think it's always too late, and I'm sure my team will tell you that. But I think there's probably a big transition when we were around 50 people, and all of a sudden had multiple layers of people in the organization, and had departments that were becoming a bit siloed, and bringing in people who had much more experience in certain areas than I ever had, and recognizing that they could do these things much better than I could, and figuring out kind of my role. How do I ensure that I'm helping set the vision, bring in the right people to the organization, put them in roles that will allow them to have impact, ensure that they have the right resources to have maximum impact, but then kind of get out of their way. I think that's probably something I'm still learning and developing, but I think there was probably a big inflection point when we were around 50 people, and then around 200 people, and then when we started opening stores and offices in multiple locations, and recognizing that there were going to be individuals on the team that I maybe hadn't even met in person, but figuring out kind of what is my role in inspiring them and ensuring that their work is aligned with our key priorities, and that they're set up for success.
So if someone was at the Professor Gilboa's class of management, and you were going over your 3 core principles for being a great manager, what would those be for you?
I'd say probably the most important things would be to kind of, number one, set and hold the vision. So ensure that regardless of what is being discussed, whether it's an individual feature on our site, whether we should be opening a new store, or how to deal with a particular area of conflict, not to lose sight of the big picture, and ensure that kind of our long-term vision for the business, our long-term goals around the impact that we all want to have doesn't get lost, and recognizing that that requires a lot of repetition, and that sometimes people can get kind of lost in the weeds. And so really helpful to kind of bring things back up to the overall vision. I think second would be establishing clear priorities, and um, uh, there can be, I think conflict can be most easily resolved when you kind of, again, go back to what are the priorities, how are they defined, what is the process to establish those priorities, and then, and I think as a kind of byproduct of that is focus. And so people aren't kind of doing too many things at once and aren't kind of spreading themselves too thin. And there aren't people in the company that are working on things that are orthogonal to one another. And then the third piece is just the importance of feedback and kind of continual feedback in the moment, be as specific as possible, and ensure that there are kind of continual mechanisms for feedback to flow throughout the organization. It's the only way that individuals can develop in their career and learn and grow, and it's the only way that teams can get better over time.
Yeah. I think that's incredible advice. It's helpful for me. It's a good reminder to me and our team as well. I think obviously the unicorn experience is to take a founder or co-founder that can scale with the business. I think you and I both know a lot of folks that probably at some point say, hey, I'd rather be starting something with early teams. I'll leave it to somebody else to run a company at scale. So it's so incredibly special that, you and Neil and your two other co-founders were able to do what you did early on and still run and grow this business so successfully today. Give everybody just a sense of what does your day look like today? What's a typical day for Dave managing a company of 2,000 people at this scale? And how have you, what are the growth hacks that you figured out over 10 years to drive efficiency? Because as a founder, I can even hear it in what you say, the same as me. There's just certain things you're like, oh, I want to go in and do that. I'm going to dive in and make sure that thing is working really well. But you can't do that, at the scale and size you are. And so what does a typical day look like for you? And what are the things that you've learned over the last decade to be really efficient with your time and to maximize the best use of your capabilities?
Yes, I'd say, my schedule looks a bit different now than it did a few months ago, even just given the remote work environment. And so, normally, my day is mostly meetings, and that's true now, and it was true a few months ago, where I have one-on-ones with my direct reports who are leading different departments, and so now I'm managing managers of managers, and sometimes of managers of managers, and so I think my goal in helping to make those leaders and their departments most effective is to help ensure that they have what they need, and sometimes that means clear prioritization from me, and sometimes it means that they need additional resources, or they need additional context that they might not have as to why we're doing something, or it might mean that they need meet or remove obstacles from external to the company, or in some other department, and so I really let those conversations. I let the department leader, my direct reports, kind of control those conversations, and let them kind of ask how I can be helpful, and I really ask them questions, and let them kind of hopefully get to the answer, as opposed to kind of directing them one way or another. And then I join some department meetings, so whether it's our engineering team, or a project management team, or a supply chain team, and talk about kind of high level vision and high level priorities, what's top of mind for me and Neil at the moment, and give people insight that I might not engage with on a day-to-day basis. And then have, kind of strategy meetings or higher level kind of decision meetings, whether that's deciding which stores we want to open, reviewing our e-commerce roadmap for the next quarter with some senior leaders on the team, where kind of my input can hopefully influence thinking and provide clarity to a lot of our team. And then, typically if we were all working in the office, then, I'd want to spend some time kind of walking around and just talking to the team and getting, I think, signals around what's working well, where people are frustrated, what's on people's mind, and try to get kind of some informal feedback. I think that becomes harder to do in a remote environment. And so, trying to kind of schedule some more informal Zoom calls or Google meetings where I can kind of get some of that signal. But I think the one thing that I've tried to focus on, which I was not good at a couple years ago, was kind of keeping some time free in my calendar. I think it becomes easy just to fill up every moment. And if you get invited to something either internal or external and you have a free spot on your calendar, it's easy to just say, yes, I'm free then. Or if there's a meeting that you don't really want to take, it's easy to say, I'm busy this week, but going to loop in my assistant and she'll find some time in a few weeks. And then a few weeks roll around and I see it on my calendar and say, well, why did I agree to take that meeting? And so just getting more comfortable saying no. And I think most importantly, thinking about, my role as a founder and co-CEO, asking, am I kind of required to be in this meeting? Am I kind of the only person in the organization that can provide value in this context? If the answer is no, then that meeting should happen without me, and someone can send notes afterwards and encourage kind of all of the individuals on our team to think that way, where it becomes easy to have these meetings that just kind of grow and grow in terms of number of participants, when a lot of the people in the meeting are not, don't say a word and they're there just kind of taking notes. That's not a great use of time. And so really being vigilant with time management, and in general, think that people really underestimate the value of their time. And so kind of focusing on how to be as efficient as possible, and leaving time for those kind of unscheduled moments to think, to connect with team members as just as people, and then also kind of making time for myself, whether that's to exercise, meditate, or just make sure I find ways to keep my sanity.
Yeah. I think you identified to me what's one of like the best growth hacks for executives that I do, and a lot of folks told me about, which is to block time on your own calendar for your highest level strategic stuff, and to give yourself the permission to have that time, not for your team. And, Jeff Bezos is famous for, making meetings really short, making people stand up and kicking people out of a meeting. They're like, hey, do you really have to be here? If not, go work on something that's more valuable for you in the company. Talk to me a little bit about, how you and Neil have been so successful for so long in the co-CEO role. Obviously that's not the traditional model. The two of you have such a unique bond from starting the company together, the journey. What is it about your relationship and the way you've structured it that just helps you be so successful as a dual CEO of the company?
Yeah, it's funny. talk to early stage entrepreneurs all the time, and we got a lot of great early advice, and try to pass on some of the things that we learned, and often am approached by co-founders who are, kind of want my advice if they should set up a co-CEO structure, and I almost universally guide against it, even though it's worked well for us. I think it's um, unusual to have the relationship that I have with Neil, and I feel super lucky um, to have him as a co-CEO, and really as a partner. Um, but the kind of the way that structure came about goes back to how we founded the company. So there were four of us. We were really close friends, and we committed to each other that our friendship and dealing with each other honestly and directly, even if that meant sometimes having challenging conversations, was going to be more important to us than the success of the business, and really meant that up front. And we got a lot of advice from people who told us, don't start a company with friends, don't start a company with four founders, you're going to end up hating each other and suing each other. And even though Jeff and Andy left day-to-day roles early on, they're still on the board. We're still best friends. We actually still vacation together and probably spend too much time together. But I think that stems from that initial commitment, setting up the business in what we thought was a really fair way. And so in the early days, none of us had titles or a hierarchy between us, but we even set up equity to vest while we were in business school, recognizing that there's generally a lot of excitement when people talk about an idea, but there's four people. There were all these other opportunities that were going to present themselves, and we weren't sure kind of what was going to happen. So let's set up a vesting structure where all of us are putting in the same amount of capital. We're all getting equal credit. But if someone decides that this is not something that they want to focus on, or if it's not working out for some reason, they get credit for time served. We don't have to have a really painful conversation when they leave around what their contributions were, how much value that they created, but we're going to establish that up front. And we did that, and when we graduated, Jeff and Andy took other jobs, stayed on the board, and Neil and I got some additional equity to make kind of the cap table reflect kind of the time commitment that was going in. And then as Neil and I were talking about, okay, well, there's two of us. We've been friends for a really long time. We've been working as equals. One of us reporting to the other was going to feel probably a bit weird and might work in the short term, but it's probably going to create friction and result in unhappiness. And we even talked about, we threw out a lot of different ideas, even having like a rotating CEO, make one person chairman of the board, one person CEO, and said, hey, we've been operating as partners. Let's continue to do that. We work really well together. Let's create titles that reflect kind of our equal seniority, and let's constantly revisit if this makes sense, and most importantly, let's constantly invest in this relationship to make it work. And I think it's worked out better than I would have predicted, and now over 10 years in, we really view ourselves as partners, and I think it's been great to have someone that can hold me accountable, who can provide me feedback, that someone who I can celebrate wins with, and it kind of makes those highs a little higher, and someone that can pick me up when things don't go as well, and it makes those lows a little higher. And so for us it's worked out quite well, but I think it is an unusual relationship in that there's not a lot of ego involved, that we are fully aligned in terms of values, in terms of where we want the business to go. And we certainly have disagreements and talk things out, but there is always a mutual trust and respect that has led to what's been a really successful partnership.
Yeah. I think it's pretty amazing and pretty unique, and says a lot about the two of you. I think it's easy for people to talk about, being a value-based organization, being friends first. The fact that the two of you have had this marriage, and for those folks that don't have co-founders, haven't had them, they don't realize how much of a real marriage it is. I think it says a lot about, how true you are to those ideals. Um, let's go backward one more time, and then I want to start, talking about where the business is today and some of your big initiatives. So, this whole interview series for me, I kind of wanted to do because I love this concept of, you know, if you could go back in time and give your own self a piece of advice, what would it be and why? And so let's take this time machine back to your 20s and back to your 30s. And if Dave today could give any piece of advice to Dave in his 20s and to Dave maybe in his early 30s, what would that advice you'd give to yourself be, and why?
Yeah, I think, probably advice I'd give myself in my 20s would be, don't be afraid to take risks with your career. And yeah, I went to Berkeley as a bioengineer. I got good grades and was presented with kind of a bunch of different job opportunities. And I think it can become easy for high achievers to take options that are presented that are fairly low risk and have pretty good rewards. And whether that's kind of the some of the high profile employers that come to recruit on campus, and all these all your classmates are trying to get these jobs, and then if you get one of them, you kind of think that that's what you should be doing, and found a lot of my friends, and I kind of fell into this as well, that you can either decide to go to a good graduate school, which sets you up for kind of a job that will set you up for another job that eventually you can do kind of what you want to do, or you can go to a consulting firm or bank or high profile company, work there for a couple of years, and then you go somewhere else for a couple of years, and then go back to business school, and then you work somewhere else for a couple of years, and then you can finally do what you want to do. And I don't think I had as much appreciation that 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 might not be the best path. That you can get you can set up a successful career that way, but to really be able to kind of control your own destiny and have the opportunity for kind of really great rewards, you have to take some great risks. And even if you fail, that there are going to be just massive learning opportunities that are going to set yourself up for likelier success down the road. And so I think even if there are kind of some pretty safe options presented to you, that you shouldn't be afraid to take risks, because those safe options are probably always going to be there. And so that's something that I don't think I appreciated as much at the time. And then, I guess advice I'd give myself in my 30s. So I'm 39 now. And it would, probably be to make sure that there's kind of balance in your life, and that career goals are super important, and it can be really great to work on something that you're passionate about, or where there's a lot of opportunity, but should also make sure that you're kind of making enough time for yourself, whether that is, and kind of have goals outside of your career, in terms of whether it is kind of your own skills that you want to learn, physical fitness, relationships that you want to invest in, and ensure that you're kind of making time for all things that are important in your life.
Yeah. What are your goals outside of work today?
So I'm trying to, I don't know, I think it's always good to try to learn new skills. So right now I'm trying to learn how to kite surf. Also trying to get much better at meditating and actually have discipline around that. And I'm trying to make time to read read real books.
Yeah. I liked your first answer a lot too. I spent 4 years in grad school between law school and business school, and I often say if I had to do it over again, I just would have tried to start, a business sooner. And I try to coach folks to think of their 20s as 5 big bets you can take yourself in 2-year increments. And as you said, that safe job is going to be there, especially for anyone who works hard and has built up, some good skills. But if someone takes a big swing on themselves and they're willing to do it 5 times over their 20s, whatever that swing is, and it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, someone's going to eventually be successful, and it's so easy to get to the end of your 20s and look back and be like, oh, I've just kind of been in a rut, or I haven't pushed myself as much as possible. And if someone's going to leave school, grad school with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, someone should be willing to, leave the school of life with $50,000 in debt, having taken their swing on a business initiative, and they'll probably be so much farther along in their career for it. All right, let's talk a little bit about the company today, where you're going in part. I think so many people know Warby Parker for buy a pair, give a pair. During the pandemic, you all evolved that a bit to get people, PPE gear all around the world. What drove that decision, and what kind of, how are you trying to lead the charge there, and like, who are you most focused on trying to help today?
Yeah, so more than anything, we've always thought of Warby Parker as a platform that can make the world better. And the most visible kind of part of our social mission and our nonprofit partnerships around our Buy a Pair, Give a Pair program, where we've now distributed well over 7 million pairs of glasses to people in need around the globe. And we've also kicked off a program in the US that we call People's Project, where we bring eye doctors into schools, primarily in low-income neighborhoods, in places like New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, provide free eye vision screenings, free eye exams, and then provide free glasses to any student that needs them. And the numbers are pretty staggering. So in New York City public schools, there are 1.1 million children, 1.1 million students. We think over 200,000 of them need glasses and don't have access to them. And so it's a pretty simple intervention that we think gives all these kids, a fair shot at life. And so we're excited about scaling those programs. Obviously, when COVID started impacting the globe in a pretty meaningful way, some of those programs were put on pause. A lot of schools that we work with in the U.S. Were closed, and so we don't have the ability to run those programs. And then in the developing world, where a lot of our Buy a Pair, Give a Pair efforts are, in some countries like India, they had a shelter-in-place order. Other countries, they were kind of not able to operate in the same way. And so we linked up with some of our partners who have a presence on the ground in a bunch of different regions around the world. And they said that they really don't have access to enough PPE. So we made the decision to say, hey, we're not going to be able to distribute glasses. Let's figure out how we can help here, and leverage some of our supply chain partners and figure out how we can source PPE, distribute them to health workers to keep them safe. And they're going to need this PPE once we're able to start distributing glasses, and once they're able to start engaging with members of their community to provide exams and glasses. And so it was really a pretty easy decision for us, where more than anything else, we want to figure out how we can have impact, and this was an opportunity to do so.
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations, rightfully so, are spending the needed extra time on, issues of diversity and inclusion. I don't think that this has become a more important issue over the last couple of months. I just think that it's gotten the right amount of attention. One of the big things we tried to do with Comparably, when we started the company a couple of years ago, is to give every company a gender score and a diversity score. And so what was important to us is to help make companies more transparent for what kind of experience people of color are having, what kind of experience women are having at companies, make it really easy to understand, if you're an engineer versus in marketing or design, what those team members think. I was really excited to hear about everything you're doing, for your racial equity strategy. Can you talk a little bit more about that and, what that process has been like for the company and, and what your goals are there personally for Warby Parker?
Absolutely. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been important to us. But to your point, I think the conversations over the last few months that we've had as a nation and that every company has had are much needed. And I think it highlighted opportunities where we have been doing some things and forcing ourselves to ask, well, what more can we do in these areas? And then where are areas that we really haven't invested enough in? And so we got a lot of feedback from our team, asked ourselves a bunch of tough questions, and then clearly articulated our racial equity strategy, both internally and made external commitments. And we have 10 goals and are going to hold ourselves accountable to achieving those goals. And they range everything from really defining Black and BIPOC representation in different roles at Warby Parker. And we had been publishing for the last couple of years, we had been publishing an impact report and had included some of our demographic breakdowns for our team, but hadn't gone into as much detail around representation at different leadership levels. And so number one, we just made it much more transparent around what our organization looks like today and clearly articulated goals on where we want to go as an organization. We made a commitment to increase growth opportunities for existing Black and BIPOC team members, have committed to training everyone in the organization on topics like unconscious bias, bystander training, and other important skills that we think are needed from everyone in our organization. We've thought a lot about areas where we have more influence that we can hopefully create opportunities outside of Warby Parker as well. So in particular in the fields of optometry and technology, and where we can work with existing optometry schools and create scholarships for Black optometry students, for example, thinking about how we can leverage our capabilities around entrepreneurship to help support underrepresented entrepreneurs, think about kind of our own vendor base. And when we consider creative partners or collaborators, ensure that we have high enough levels of representation and that we're working with a diverse group of collaborators. To thinking about the impact that we can have on elections and ensuring that we're increasing voting participation for underrepresented communities and those communities that are disproportionately challenged by barriers to voting. And so I have tried to think of a set of goals that may not be comprehensive, but is touching many different parts of our organization and the industries in which we live in, again, with the goal of having positive impact and thinking about our racial equity strategy, much the same way that we think about our business as a whole, that we first want to focus on the impact that we can have internal to Warby Parker, and hopefully be a positive example and inspire other companies and other entrepreneurs to think along the same lines, thereby kind of multiplying the impact that we're able to have.
Yeah. I love the example you gave earlier of taking the inputs of all those early employees, the 200 different values, you all coalescing it. We actually do a really similar experience on an offhand. Our core values are things like integrity and winning together and growth and innovation, obviously transparency, which is at the heart of everything we do as an organization. Have those core values stayed the same from the early days today, or evolved? And what are some of those core values for Warby Parker today?
So we think of our core values really as our constitution that can evolve and change. We don't expect to kind of wholesale throw out any of the concepts, but that as the organization grows, that we should be constantly revisiting them. And so, as I mentioned, we first went through the process when we were 20 people, and then a few years later, when we were hundreds of people, we realized that, hey, the organization is a completely different scale. We now have employees that are thousands of miles apart that haven't met each other. Let's kind of pressure test these and see if we want to kind of modify any of them. And we committed to our team that over the next few months, now that we're thousands of people, we'll be going through a similar process and involving everyone. And a couple of the core values. One that has remained the same is inject fun and quirkiness into everything we do. And we recognize that for us to have the impact that we think is possible, it's going to require a lot of really hard work over a very long time period. And so we want to make sure that we're having fun along the way, and having fun with each other as a team, having fun with our customers and partners, and whether that is thinking about we have a tradition around Halloween, and everyone kind of dressing up in costumes and making sure that we're not taking ourselves too seriously, to figuring out the right level of kind of quirkiness and copy that goes out in our emails to customers. A value that we did modify kind of from the first time to the second time that we went through the process was we initially had a value, which was the golden rule: treat others as we want to be treated. And as we scaled as an organization, and as our team became more diverse, and as our customer base became more diverse, we realized that our own needs and desires were not always going to be the same as people or teams that we were engaging with. And so we changed that golden rule to, from treat others as we want to be treated to treat others as they want to be treated. So it's just one word change, but I think it's a pretty powerful change, and builds in this concept of empathy and recognizing that for us to design the best solutions, we first have to put ourselves in other shoes and understand kind of their perspective. And so I think that is an example of us kind of learning and growing as an organization, and continuing to modify our approach and ensure that we are being as thoughtful as possible in the values that we hold ourselves accountable to.
All right. Well, last question I have, and it's been on my mind since we started the interview. What was it like to go backpacking for months with no cell phone? Because that is an experience that I'm not sure hardly anyone's going to ever have in their life going forward. And how did your Jewish parents survive for all those months? Because I did that for 5 weeks after high school, and mine almost lost their mind on me.
Today it seems like kind of a crazy concept. At the time, all these international calling plans are super expensive, and I was about to be a full-time student, didn't have any money, and it didn't seem quite as audacious. But I would check in. This was a time when traveling around, you would have to find an internet cafe, and you'd pay a couple bucks, and you'd get 15 minutes of time, and sometimes the internet would go out in these different regions, or I'd be in, a part of the world where they didn't have electricity for a few days. And I'd committed to my mom that anytime I had an opportunity to send an email, I'd just check in, even if it was one line. So she knew I was alive. There was something liberating about not having other people, not being on other people's schedules, and kind of having the time to think and explore, kind of look back fondly on those days.
Yeah, it just can be so incredibly present, unlike any other way. I think one of the magical things of life is just to put the devices away for some period of time. I've got 2 little kids, and so for me, it's a struggle to get away, but when I do, I feel like I'm just such a better parent. I got to say, Dave, I've known about the company for a long time. I think you and I have had a chance to interact a little bit over the years, but man, you are the real deal. And the business obviously is having so much success. It's going to have so much success, but to see the good that you're doing in the world, that you're continuing to do, how you prioritize people and your team and giving back and civic involvement and racial equality, we'd all be better for having more leaders like you. And so it was an honor to get to spend some time to you today. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. This was fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right, everyone. You also have great feedback on Comparably, and so we got to get more of your team leaving feedback on there as well too. Thank you for everyone listening in. We look forward to having you join us for continuing more If I Knew Then conversations. And Dave, to you and your team, thank you again and much continued success. Bye, Thanks, folks. Stay safe, stay sane, and we'll talk to you soon.